You might know Tyr from the pool, or maybe you know it from the gym. But this is the Tyr Valkyrie Elite Carbon. And with it, you're now gonna know Tyr as a brand that makes really exciting race shoes. Yo, what's going on? My name is Kafuzi and I'm a not only runner who reviews shoes here on YouTube, and today I'm gonna talk to you guys all about the brand new Tyr Valkyrie Elite Carbon. But before I do want to go over some disclosures. This is a pair of shoes that Tyr sent to me for the purpose of review, so I did not have to pay for them. However, no one's paying me to make this video or to include their shoe in this video, and no one's gonna get a chance to preview any of my footage or my thoughts before you guys get a chance to see this video on YouTube. So with that disclosure out of the way, let's talk about Tyr Valkyrie Elite Carbon, and let's start with the specs. We've got a 39.5 millimeter stack height shoe with a 6 millimeter drop, giving us 33.5 millimeters of stack height in the forefoot. And Tyr is calling this midsole Launch PX. There's 2 layers of beaded P-backs foam here that sandwich a full-length carbon fiber plate. Moving to the outsole, we've got a decent amount of rubber that has a good amount of surface area coverage, but it's not too heavy and there's not too much of it. We've got a large landing pad in the forefoot and then a couple of strips on each side of the heel. On the upper, we have hyper weave mesh material, which is a little bit more on the daily trainer side of things. It's giving you a lot of room, it fits true to size, but it's also giving you a lot of structure. There's both overlays and then an internal cage to help keep the foot in place. And then there's also a very light but very heavily gusseted tongue and a moderate amount of foam in the heel cup, which is very floppy, which is what I like to see for my race day shoes. Altogether, this shoe comes in a little bit on the heavier side, at least as far as racing shoes go. It's 7.8 ounces or 221 grams. Okay, now that we've talked about the paper specs, let's talk about what it's like to run in the shoe. And I gotta tell you, it's very fun shoe to run in, and it's P-backs in all the good ways you think about when you think about running in a P-backs race shoe. It's got a really good amount of compression in terms of absorbing impact, but it's got a really exciting bounce to it as well. I also really appreciate the rocker position in this shoe. It's putting all the foam in this shoe exactly where I want it. So the rocker starts a little bit later than we've seen in a lot of race shoes lately, but what that means for me is when I am landing on my forefoot strike, I'm getting a big bulk of that P-backs goodness to compress as my foot hits the ground, and then it's decompressing and snapping forward nicely as I'm rolling through and pushing off into my next stride. It makes for a very dynamic and fun experience for those longer distance runs. It's also got a very wide footprint. It doesn't pinch in underneath the arch of the foot, which is something we've been seeing in a lot of racers lately. And so what that does is it makes for a much more stable landing pad as well. So for those of you who have found other racing shoes to be a little bit too unstable for you, or maybe perhaps a little bit too chaotic, that I feel like the way that this foam is compressing is not only fun, but it's also very predictable. I enjoyed running in this shoe from even as far as easy paces all the way up to 5K paces, but the faster you get in this shoe, I feel like that's where some of the weight starts to make itself really apparent. But if we're using this as a marathon shoe or a marathon training shoe or as a half marathon training shoe, I feel like you're not really going to notice the weight. It's not going to be a problem for you, and you're probably also going to take the trade-off of having a little bit more weight in exchange for a little bit more stability and predictability in terms of what that bounce is going to feel like every time your foot hits the ground. And as far as the upper goes, I felt like it fit true to size. And for those of you who have been complaining that race shoes are a bit unnecessarily snug, you're gonna find that the fit of the Tyr is still comfortable for racing. In other words, a little bit on the snug side like you want it for racing, but it's not going to be too snug. There's a little bit more room, a little bit more forgiveness in the fit of this last. But I do feel like it feels ultimately a little bit more daily trainer than it does race shoe. And some of the trade-offs for that are going to be, it's not going to feel quite as aggressive, but it will last a little bit longer because I do feel like these materials are built to withstand a lot more miles than a traditional race upper might. And overall, I'd say that considering that this is Tyr's first attempt at a racing shoe, I'd say that this shoe is astonishingly good. Now let's move on to some pairing options and the buying guide for this shoe, where I'll talk about the pricing and also some alternatives that you might also want to consider. As far as pairing options go, first let's start with the Max Cushion shoe. This is the one that if your feet are feeling a little extra beat up or you're just feeling a little bit more tired, this is going to be something that feels both supportive and cushioned. It's one of my favorite Max Cushion shoes I think probably ever made, and I also feel like there's a lot of things going on with the fit and the shape of these shoes that are going to be reminiscent of each other, and if you like the one, you're probably going to really like the other. And then for everyday and even for some lighter workouts, I think that you can reach for the Endorphin Speed 3. Now this is a shoe that I didn't really get along with for my running mechanics, but I know a lot of you guys out there have been really enjoying this shoe, and I feel like these are going to be really good companions together because the Endorphin Speed 3 uses a beaded PIBA foam as well, and it has a nylon plate in here that's going to make it feel a little bit snappier without being too aggressive, so you could use it for light workouts or just for everyday running. And all three of those shoes together could make for a really nice set. But keep in mind, I haven't tested it yet, and I'm not sure that it's available yet, but Tyr is also going to be making a training companion to this shoe that's going to have a lot of specs that are very similar to the Endorphin Speed 3. So make sure you're hitting the subscribe button for when that Tyr shoe comes out. Now let's talk about the buying guide and some alternatives you might want to also consider. The Tyr Valkyrie Elite Carbon is on sale now at $250, and I feel like that's a pretty good price for this shoe and what it's offering. I feel like you're gonna get a lot of longevity out of it, a lot of use out of it, a lot of versatility out of the shoe. But let's talk about some other shoes that I feel like compete with it or that remind me of the Valkyrie Elite Carbon. And normally I kind of do them in series. I'll show you one alternative and then another, but I really feel like these two alternatives I'd like to talk about together, and they're both from Saucony. That's going to be the Endorphin Pro 3 and the Endorphin Elite. And the reason why I want to talk about these two shoes together in comparison against the Tyr Valkyrie Elite Carbon is because, one, with the Saucony Endorphin Pro 3, you're using a beaded PIBA foam, just like the Valkyrie Elite Carbon is using. There's a full-length carbon fiber plate, and it's a shoe that I feel like is very accessible to a wide range of runners and is a little bit more comfortable for a longer times on feet as well. But the two shoes have slightly different geometries, and I actually feel like the shape of the Valkyrie Elite reminds me a lot of the shape of the Endorphin Elite. Now, the Endorphin Elite uses a slightly different kind of PIBA foam in here, and so the squish dynamics of this shoe are really quite different, and the weight is a lot different. This new foam, the Power Run HG that they use, is extremely lightweight, and it's a lot of fun. But at least in terms of the shape of the shoe, I feel like these two shoes line up really well. And so really, I think the best way I can describe the Tyr Valkyrie Elite is like it's taking the foam of the Endorphin Pro 3 and putting it into the shape of the Endorphin Elite. And so that's why I really like to talk about these two shoes together, and kind of in an interesting twist of fate, the Endorphin Pro 3 retails at $225 and the Endorphin Elite retails at $275, and right in the middle is the $250 of the Tyr Valkyrie Elite Carbon. So those are my thoughts on the Valkyrie Elite Carbon, a really fantastic inaugural race shoe from Tyr. Really excited to see a new entrant into the carbon plated racer space. Let me know in the comments if you have any other questions, or better yet, stop by the live stream I do Monday through Friday over on the Kofuzi Running Club channel. I'd love to talk to you guys in the chat. That's all I have for today, everybody. Thanks so much for making it all the way to the end of this video. Hopefully you guys are staying safe out there on your runs, and I'll see you in the next one.
Yo, what's going on?